Hey friends, and welcome to another episode of Field Notes, insights and observations for the travel marketer. My name is Eric Hultgren, and we have a great one for you today. This time around, we're talking about data actionability. If you've ever wondered about how to take that giant pile of data that you have and turn it into insights that can be actionable at the DMO or state level, this episode is for you. We jump into AI, we jump into sustainability, we talk a lot about data and the impact that data can have, and I promise you, the insights in this are amazing. Enjoy this episode, and we'll talk to you soon.
And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our lovely host, Eric Hultgren. He is the National Director of Content with Advanced Travel and Tourism. Thank you, Eric. Take it away.
Thank you, Veronica. And I just wanted to say before I jump into this, do not sleep on Marketing College. It is one of the coolest things that STS does, and I will see you all at Connections. So, as Veronica said, today's webinar is called How to Make Data Actionable for Your Destination. And here's why we named it that. Because most of us in this industry, we're not short on data. We're short on the story that makes that data mean something to our teams, to our boards, to the travelers we're trying to reach. And that is the gap we're trying to close today. In order to do that, I've got three amazing guests who I dare say I would call friends who approach this problem from three different angles. First up is Frida Bahja. She's the Director of Research at Experience Kissimmee, etc. She came into tourism from environmental engineering. Her lens is amazing. And she spent her career asking why travelers behave the way they do, why destinations become vulnerable, and what it actually takes to make tourism work for the communities that host it. Her research has been published in journals like Tourism Management and the Annals of Tourism Research. She's been putting those findings to work inside a real DMO. Frida, welcome, my friend. And then next up, Ktimene Axtell. She is the CEO of Arrivalist, and before she led Arrivalist, Ktimene ran a DMO team that won the National Geographic Traveler Platinum Award in sustainability. So she's been a client, and she knows what it feels like to sit across the table from a data vendor and try to figure out what and if any of it means for your Monday morning. Ktimene, it's also great to have you. And then finally, Josh Gibson. He is Chief Analytics Strategy Officer for the Tennessee Department of Tourist Development. Josh came up through state parks, moved through digital and social strategy, had a stint at FedEx, and then came back to the public sector. And upon his return, he brought that product thinking back with him and applies that now to one of the most interesting data problems in the industry. Not just tracking who comes to Tennessee, but understanding what happens at the borders, who crosses in, who almost comes in but stays in Asheville or North Carolina, and what that loss actually costs to your DMO. Josh, welcome. Now, as you can see, we're going to go through a few distinct threads today. We're going to go to visitation data platforms, state level strategy, industry trends. I'll talk a lot about AI, and then we'll be weaving in your questions throughout the rest of the day. So if you've got them, please jump into the Q&A, drop them, and we will answer them as we go. So first up, I'm going to talk with Frida and Ktimene. And Frida, I will wait for you to join. There you are. Welcome, friends. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me.
It is actually my pleasure. This is very exciting for me to talk to both of you. And we're going to start with Frida. So, Frida, you came into tourism, as I said earlier, with an interesting lens from environmental engineering. And that obviously, you and I talked before this webinar, not a typical path. And so, what did that lens do that you wouldn't have if you had just come in through a pure tourism path or a more traditional way to get into this industry?
Thank you for asking me. I don't get to talk about this a lot, to be honest, so I appreciate the opportunity. I do have an interdisciplinary educational background. I was an environmental engineer, got my bachelor, my undergrad, and master's. And then as I was working in projects, I saw how tourism was bringing prosperity to rural areas. So then I decided to get specialized and did my second master's in hospitality and tourism, and then pursued a PhD in tourism. Really fell in love to marry these disciplines. I do think that there are some distinctions that, natural sciences or applied sciences vary from what tourism could be as a social science. Certainly, the lens of problem solving is a really strong one for engineering. I'm glad that I have inherited that from the discipline. It really allows you to focus fully on understanding a problem before even jumping into solution. Usually in engineering, solutions are very costly, so we take a lot of time front end to investigate, to make sure we are eliminating any causalities, anything that might interfere before we jump into that. And I take that principle as I work in my research projects, on a daily basis. Another aspect of it is that in engineering teams usually work with not just between departments, but you also work with team members that have different expertise, like you'd work with an ecologist, anthropologist, and so on. So that's a really great skill. I think as I work in a destination, we are often communicating with different organizations and institutions across the destination that have different specialties. So just being able to understand the collaborative spirit of it and be a good partner in those conversations has been very helpful. And then certainly, I think the measurement aspect, when we talk in engineering, everything has to be precise and measured properly, defined, and so on, which is a harder thing to do in tourism, as we all know. But
Sure.
at
That's
least,
that's why we're here, right?
yes, but at least I think the understanding of when we use proxies in tourism and what are we talking about? What are the limitations that we have on the table as we are interpreting this data? I think that's been very helpful. And certainly the system thinkings. In engineering, everything is interrelated, and I think in tourism is the same. And often we tend to see problems in silo, but that's not the case. All of our campaigns and effects, all the efforts we take are likely to impact some other parts of the system. So that has been, a good skill, I think, to take over. And maybe a last one would be the communication. Usually, I'm not much of a wordy person. Kind of keep it straight to the point. What are we talking about? And let's focus on the problem. And I think with our teams being fast-paced in the tourism space, so that's actually a good skill, just to kind of be very focused on what we're trying to achieve and even how we communicate the results and data instead of just overloading the team with this is all and you go into depth. I think it's very important to have that information as potentially supplementary for them to read if they have the bandwidth, but being able to condense that information into straight, actionable talking points, I think it's very helpful. And it's the beauty of tourism that we have the opportunity to join from many disciplines. I know that this is, I'm coming from engineering, but I know a lot of my peers come from different areas. And I think that makes it also a great learning experience because we all bring different lenses as we're looking at it as a phenomenon altogether.
Awesome. And speaking of a different lens, Timothy, you obviously came from an award-winning DMO before you were on the vendor side. Can you talk a little bit about that gap that, of the
Mm.
reality of what they said that they could give you and what you were actually getting and how Arrivalist can kind of
Mm.
close that gap?
Yes, thank you, Eric. Yes, so my background is in economics, and I worked at the Amelia Island CVB before coming over to Arrivalist. So I was actually an Arrivalist client. And that switch was illuminating for me because I came from one destination where I helped produce events and run the website. So I felt like I knew the heart and soul of this destination to coming over to Arrivalist and having this 30,000-foot view of over 100 destinations. And there was this exciting moment of walking into a room with a client for the first time and understanding possibly more than they do about their actual visitors to the destination. Some of that's invisible, right? Their seasonality and exactly how the visitors were moving through that destination. So that was very exciting for me. And I would say it was mind blowing, maybe for me and also for them, being part of that wave of big data for the first time. So what I've observed in terms of use cases is arrival stay is often used for board reports, for market selection, for vendor selection. But I would say, not in every case, but in some cases, I would say it's underutilized for advocacy and for stewardship. And that can be, to Frida's point, you have a lot of data sources, some of them are overlapping or redundant, and you have individuals who are wearing a lot of hats and you have to make sense of it. So just to give you some context, back in 2016, that's when I was an Arrivalist client, we were using Revlist data for sustainability initiatives, which maybe we'll talk about later. We were using it for, of course, the standards, the board reports. We were using to apply for awards because guess what? Judges, they like data. It makes them feel secure about their
Sure.
decisions. We were initiating conversations with the community about sustainability. And those were the initiatives that we took. And our tools are so much better now, so much more powerful, and really speak to the heart of what those destinations need. So my team can help our clients to apply the data to the maximum, and it will be different from client to client. Now, the flip side of this, which I think is part of the intent of your question, is that you do see the limits of the data or what the best use case is. You've been exposed to a number of different vendors or partners. So that helps me, the team, to come in and, to Bree's point, assess what is the problem? What are we trying to solve for here? Is our product a good fit? Would we refer business outside in some cases? So it helps us have that instinct to see around the corner. Is this going to result in solid outcomes? Is it enough media to measure? So we can actually walk away from relationships that might not be the best fit for both parties. So that's the reality of it.
Awesome. And obviously, we're talking about like making data actionable. And so, Frida, for you, when you are translating research findings, we talked about this in kind of the pre-interview, and you're trying to get it to the communication department or the rest of the marketing department, where does that translation tend to break down? And how have you figured out how to kind of close that gap so your research and what that research indicates into an action is something that another team would understand who might not have done the research originally?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the team and on the dynamics of the team. I feel like every DMO has a different composition of research versus marketing. In some DMOs, the researcher fits within the marketing department, so the dynamics are slightly different. But from where I stand, we actually are housed under the operations department, so we serve the whole organization. And that allows us to be a little bit more objective on the data we present and how we share it with our teams. Certainly, sharing data is a communication after all. So I think viewing it from the lens that there is a sender and a receiver in this communication is very important. And making sure that if you're the sender, making sure that your data is clearly transmitting what's important. You are highlighting what could be an action item for them, making your suggestions very digestible in a way so they don't become scary and get them overloaded with information. From practice, one thing that I find that as a really good practice to do is actually to have the marketing team or any team for that matter that we're doing research with, to have them involved since the beginning of the research process. So when we're trying to identify a study, or if they come up with a question they need to be answered, or if they are asking us to look for shifting strategy, whatever might be the case, it can be something from small to a very complicated research case. Having them involved fully, making sure that we understand first what information they are looking for, what's their actual inside need, like what they are trying to apply from this information, and what would be their ultimate success case. Once we have those parameters kind of calibrated since the beginning of conversation, it is easier, I think, through the process to refine. For example, if we're doing a research study, it's easier then to refine the survey instrument and make sure we are aligning everything to be tailored to their need, not what I want to research, because as a researcher, I want to know everything.
Sure. Yes, right.
I want to explore everything about the topic. Like, I'm a curious person, but the reality is that this is not about me, it's about them. And I think going into it with that mindset is helpful. And as you deliver the results, I think they are already aware of what to expect. So they are more engaged, more prepared to commit to the changes, rather than if I were to just all of a sudden give them some information and ideas. It would be really hard to have their buy-in. So I think that's an important one. And of course, it's a two-way communication consistently. I think we need to hear as much as we provide information, and keeping a humble approach when we share data, I think it's helpful. It's okay that we don't digest the information in the same way. And sitting down with your teams and just asking them, is meeting in person better? do you prefer this as an attachment? Do you think we should do a video about this? Like just kind of figuring out what's the best way that people absorb the information. I think it's helpful. And with different teams, we work on different formats, just kind of tailoring it to what works best for them. But the last one I would mention is making sure the research is applicable, because sometimes we want to change the world, and we have to kind of fit our insights and solution to make them a little bit realistic within like resources that the team has and the budget, and maybe even explaining if that solution is a phased approach or if it is something that can be done in short term. All of this, I think, altogether really help to keep them engaged, see the value, and really not be overwhelmed or get intimidated by it. Those
Awesome.
are kind of like, you also learn as you go. I think
Yeah.
if you're open, people will provide you feedback and you can adjust. Yeah.
So, Timothy, one of Arrivalist pitches is this idea of verified behavior versus just modeled intent. You've got a blog on your website that talks about tracking actual skiers in Colorado versus a human being who Googled ski boots. Can you talk to me about that distinction and why it might matter more now than it did 5 years ago? And what does that change about a DMO and how they should make decisions?
Well, thank you, Eric, for bringing up our newest product. It's called Arrivalist Audiences. And we're well known for lift studies and proving incrementality in the measurement space. And we thought, well, what if we could take these results and inform who folks are targeting to help them be even more efficient? So what we've built is something that closes the loop. And for the first time, you can work with Arrivalist to get in front of those potential travelers. Consumers have more options than ever, obviously, to plan their trips. So our first iteration of this product, we call it fact-based, basically using the past to predict the future. Sometimes that's right, and sometimes it's not, right?
Sure.
So we look at origin markets, like we look at destination markets, we look at movement inside of POIs, and we look at time in order to create these audiences. And because we're looking at that past behavior, that's why we're calling it fact-based. Okay. So let's say somebody, they've skied at Steamboat, Breckenridge, Keystone. They might be a better target for Vail than maybe somebody who is exhibiting those buying signals for Vail or Beaver Creek, but they also have, let's say, Taos and Tahoe in their consideration set. Like, which one is a safer bet? So we actually believe that fact-based and intent-based play really well together. And the way that we push these audiences out into LiveRamp allows a media buyer to basically layer on those signals to create their own audience and to port it over to any DSP. So that's the kind of the technical, the intent and fact-based side. The other ways that we see our clients buying and the industry buying is obviously geographic, demographically based. And to take that example a little bit further with skiing, let's say someone wants to target or bring a future skier back to Colorado, right? Let's say me, right? In my census block group, I'm not even on this webinar because I'm retired and I'm over 70 and I have bad knees. Like, I'm not the ideal target. Right. I'm also in potentially economically depressed DMA that doesn't have a direct flight. So for all intents and purposes, I'm not the ideal target. But if you were to look at my past behavior, that cuts through all of those other targeting criteria. It's somebody who has reliably visited these ski resorts in the past. They might be the best target. So again, today it's using the past to predict the future, and it's specific to our audience's offering.
That's awesome. So we're running a little short on time here. So I've got one last question that's kind of a jump ball for the two of you. And I'm wondering if you could, you were just talking about the future, Timothy. Like if you could put your, kind of future hat on for the two of you, and you can answer each one at a time. What's the question you want tourism data to answer in the next 5 years that we have not been able to answer yet?
You want to go first, Ktimene?
Yes, so this is something I've
She's like, I
I've thought about
absolutely do. Let me
for
go.
a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take off my arrivalist hat for a moment, or leave half a hat on. For a long time, because my background is in sustainable tourism and economics, I find that collectively as an industry, we almost have this case of chronic myopia where we're looking at what's in front of us. And there's the parts of the industry that are very self-congratulatory. For example, hotels, right? We saved this much water um, by cleaning only the towels that were on the floor. That's fantastic. But what if we look at all the water that needs to be used to cool the data centers and all the AI based planning, right? Then are we saving on water? It's questionable. So I've long been fascinated with carbon offsetting, right? So to understand when you're putting out digital media, right, you're inviting somebody to your destination and they're going to travel there, right? If they respond to your media, they're going to fly or drive or maybe both of them. And then guess what? They're going to go back home, right? So as an economist, what fascinates me is economic externalities. Okay. So what happens outside of that transaction? So, right, you bring the visitor here and it's locally sourced ingredients to the restaurants, right? But what about the getting here? What about what is happening outside of the destination? Who's paying for that? Not the consumer in large part today, and not the destination. So I would actually issue a challenge to destinations, right? Who is going to be the first to offset even 1% of their marketing plan, right? You invited them here. Are you going to offset that carbon? Are you going to offset, the economic impact of all that water that was used, right? So I want to see a destination shape up, and then what we're willing to do at Arrivalist is put the data behind it, right? We can quantify. Here's how many people visited. Here's how we can see if they got here by flying or driving. So let us help you with that carbon. And it's going to be an estimate. It's not going to be exact, right? And then you can think about the mitigation efforts or even bring a sponsor on board and let's do this together and create a new standard for destinations. When we talk about advocacy and stewardship, it's not just our little destination within our borders, like our own little country. We're thinking about the full visitor, the full trip. So I would like us to consider economic externalities and to be the first company to quantify that and raise the bar.
Love it. Frida?
That's very exciting because I would love to know that too. So please keep us posted. I think I would say we need kind of to continue to evolve the cycle of data. Data in tourism and DMOs has become increasingly better over the last years. We have more data than ever technically in our hands for tourism. So, but we still have fragmented data, and I think seeing the full visitor journey would be great for us from the destination perspective, because I think with this fragmented data, we oversimplify a lot of the problems and the approaches we take. And the other one that is more of a personal one, I really would love to see how we redefine success in the tourism generally, the success for the destination and the success for the DMO, coming from the pre-era where everything was towards growth and visitation. We completely understand these KPIs have worked for so long, but it's like this bigger picture. What is the actual success? What's the legacy? Kind of that we need to think through. And the success of the DMO doesn't necessarily mean that is correlating with the success of the destination, which most of the time they do, but how are we defining a successful DMO, and what are those kind of parameters that can be standardized? Because I feel like every destination has their own little world of how we talk about this, but just kind of more standard measurement across them.
Awesome. All right, we'll leave it there. We'll bring you two back for Q&A. Ktimene, Frida, thank you so much for the time. We'll talk to you in a bit.
Thank you,
All right.
Eric.
You are welcome. Thank you for coming. We will bring Josh in. He is, of course, Chief Analytics and Strategy Officer for the Tennessee Department of Tourist Development. And there he is. How are you, my friend?
I'm well. How are you?
I am well as well. You and I also in the pre-interview, we kind of talked about how you got here, and you were describing your career as like moving through three distinct lenses, one in affordable housing, one at the state park level, and at FedEx. And as we talked, most people would see that as a career, somebody who would end up kind of being a generalist, somebody who's good at all sorts of things. But you very specifically became somebody who's a specialist in data actionability. So how did that happen? And how did those three things coalesce to kind of give you that lens?
Yeah, well, I didn't set out obviously to specialize in data. I'm obviously the least educated and accredited speaker on this call today. But I quickly learned through those different phases the importance of data storytelling and data decision making. At state parks, I developed the ability to see the full funnel. I built from Facebook ad to conversion. I could see the whole thing. I could tie a campground booking to a particular ad, and that was really my first big dive into like, oh, this is fun. I can do this, and then I took that at FedEx and had bigger data sets but similar problems. I was surprised at how similar government and the
Sure.
for-profit worlds could be in that way. But learned new skills, took on new tools, exposed myself to SQL and some other data processing languages and tools that allow me to expose user experience issues that ultimately uh, affected and benefited the customer on the end product. And so really take those experiences and kind of decided that I enjoy taking data and making it accessible and using it to support the mission. And so that kind of brought me back to public service because that's where both the data was available, the passion was there, but then also it's just a fulfilling space to kind of operate in.
Absolutely. And when we were talking, you and I landed on the five whys that FedEx does. And I'm wondering if you can explain kind of how that models your thinking in the work that you do now, where you're going through this process of the five whys when you come upon, I should say, an issue or a problem that many DMOs or attractions might not have that, where they'll just ask one why and move on. But can you explain the FedEx five whys and
Yeah.
kind of how that helps you today?
Yeah. So when I got to FedEx, they really pushed this model of QDM, quality design management, quality delivery management. And it's this idea of taking different approaches to answering questions. And one of the ways they do that is a tool called the five whys, which to break it down, five whys is just you sit there and you don't take the first answer to a question. You try to dig deeper and ask, well, why is that? Well, why is that? Well, why is that? And so, a good example for us, oftentimes, like I'll just look at different, Samari data or Rivalist or whatever, which is kind of what our market's doing. We were doing that a few weeks ago, and we're looking at campaign performance across drive markets. We have 8 borders for our state. We're tied for the
Sure.
most in the U.S. So we have a lot of strong nearby audiences. We're also pretty thin and narrow state, so it's like almost everybody doesn't live in our state in the major population centers, right? Uh, so what we saw was that mid-distance markets, were performing pretty well from a lift perspective, but some of our closer markets weren't showing lift. And so the easy question is to say, why isn't that working? But as you dig deeper and you ask more whys, you start realizing like it's not that we're not getting the visitors. They're in volume, they're performing like the control group. Like what's the problem? And ultimately, as you kind of dig through that, you see that the issue wasn't performance so much as expectation. We're using the same KPI to measure the effectiveness of a border market as we are one that's 4 or 5 hours away. And I think different markets might require different KPIs because we might need them to do different things. So the real question for us became, are we asking the right markets to deliver the right outcomes and then measuring them the right way? And when you kind of drill in and you keep asking why and you keep challenging your thinking or your assumptions, you can change, your strategy and your measurement philosophy.
And you and I were talking earlier about the amount of counties that are in Tennessee. I think there's like 95. And this idea that you just sort of started to hit on where there are some counties that can feed themselves and there are others that need a little bit of assistance. Can you talk about your strategy and then kind of get into what happened with the 37 counties that were underperforming and then started to outperform? Can you talk about that entire thing? Because that was such an interesting story and the focus on counties that needed a little bit of help and how you can use data to help those counties that don't have huge budgets and don't have huge teams.
Yeah, of course. And I've gone through the attendee list. I see some of my partners in crime on this call. So thank you all for joining today. And some of this work is a testament to the work that those partners have done and my teammates. So over the last 8 years, Tennessee, I guess 8 years ago, Tennessee identified 44 counties that were either economically distressed or at risk based on some key kind of economic indicators. Many of those, weren't going to grow through kind of the traditional economic paths, right? They don't have a hospital, they don't have, these things that would bring manufacturing, or they have been searching for an industrial park development for 20 years. But to no avail. And so, what they do have are tourism assets. They have lakes. They might have a state park. They probably have a cute downtown. So the approach that our team took, wasn't one big initiative. It was kind of a series of small, repeatable improvements over time. At the highest level, we did stuff like, building structure. We helped communities organize and plan. We did day-long strategy sessions in all of those communities where we brought stakeholders together to talk about what they saw the vision for their community being in 25 years from tourism, showed them what tourism has been doing for them and what it could do, kind of vision cast in that way. We worked with them to grow funding. Some of that was showing them how they could grow more local dollars, for tourism efforts. Some of that was through grants. We used ARPA funding to give grants to our communities. We gave access to data tools through this process. We've tried to put data both into our support team members' hands, our division managers who support those areas, but then also tried to give some tools that either through co-ops or through standing up dashboards that our partners can log in and see. Every partner can access, that give them more real-time data. We also did some stuff like working on helping them build websites or different technical assistance programs. Like we partnered with Miles to do Google optimization and TripAdvisor optimization, where they literally help the businesses in those communities optimize their profiles so that more people were able to discover those communities through TripAdvisor and Google, right? So it's not even just helping the DMOs, it's also helping the DMOs customers. And so, we work to lower the barrier to both money and tools and information, and we used our weight to kind of come in and help validate tourism for those communities, especially in areas where leaders might question that. They might question the DMO saying it, but they don't question the state saying it as much. So all those things, it's a long game, but over time we've seen more of those communities start to outperform their peers. We have had, you mentioned it, 37 of those 44 outperformed the U.S. average over this period of time, so through 2024, in terms of economic growth from tourism, according to Tourism Economics. So we're really excited about that, and hope to continue pushing growth in those areas.
It's some incredible work, which is why I wanted to take a couple minutes to spotlight it. And the other thing I want to talk about is you are extremely passionate about not only having data that's actionable, but getting it to people as fast as possible so they can take said action. Can you talk about where that system for you guys tends to break down and how you're addressing where that breaks down, where it's not fast enough, or the data doesn't come across the right way, or like where the friction is in the work that you're doing and how you're solving for that friction?
Yeah, when I was trying to think about this question, at state parks, as I mentioned, you had this controlled environment, right? Like one website, one booking system, attribution was super clean. You could see where every dollar kind of materialized, especially in digital. For DMOs, you're never going to have that level of precision, right? The goal really isn't perfect attribution, it's useful attribution. And so we've been trying to kind of work on that. And you mentioned speed. When data is slow, I think we end up making decisions based on what used to work or what used to be true, but not what's happening now, right? So like, if right now the most available economic impact data that our 95 counties have is the 2024 data. 8 years ago, that basically was all that was shared, was the economic impact data. But we're here in April of 2026, almost May, and the most recent data they have is 2024. And too much has changed during that, right? So how you were performing in 2024 is way different now. I mean, you've had, gas has gone from $3 to $4. Well, that changes how people travel. And that then changes where you're going to spend the money, how you control your budget. So we found so many of our partners had data that was really old like that to benchmark themselves. And so we've gone and we've partnered with Arrivalist and Zartico and Placer and several of the tools in the space. We're kind of like, let's have as many tools as we can have available to us. of those that we can, let's push them to our partners directly through dashboards. Let's give them discounts on data that they can purchase themselves, or let's be a resource and available where they can call, they can text, they can email, they can say, hey, like what's going on in our market, and we can go pull stuff that's a month old, 2 months old, not 17 months old.
Right,
And
right.
that's been our biggest approach, I think, is like where especially with like sales tax data and some stuff like that, how can we actually get to what is really happening down to the city level in these communities in the most real time? Like we're never going to get to it happened yesterday. Even the mobile data partners and credit card spend, like there's a lag of 10 days or 2 weeks
Yep.
or
Yeah.
whatever, right? Like you're never going to get to like somebody swiped a card over here just now and and we have their data. But if we can shorten those windows, I think we can make more educated decisions.
Josh, never say never. Let's aim for
I
real-time data.
I don't even think I want that level of
All right, my friend. Thank
government
you so
visibility.
much. We'll bring you back for Q&A here in about 10 minutes as we dive into data and how it impacts where you're found in the AI universe. So let me do this, I think. There we go. All right. There we go. All right. Let me introduce you to Maya. So Maya wakes in the morning, she stretches and yawns a little bit. The room she's in begins to meet the ambient temperatures that she likes during the day because she likes it to be cold at night, but a different temperature during the day. The light in her room begins to match sunlight, even though it's still dark outside. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, her favorite brew is brewing into her ember mug, and that ember mug will keep her coffee the perfect temperature till about noon because she's very bad at finishing coffee in the morning. It usually takes her half a day. Her AI assistant lets her know that her flight to San Juan has been booked overnight, picked her favorite seat, and has booked a seaside restaurant 9 p.m. with her husband, Brad. In the other room, her phone quietly dings with the same notification. Her phone also noticed that there's a problem with her typical route to work. So it has rerouted her ability to get to work and moved her first meeting by 8 minutes. See, Maya has been having a really tough 6 weeks, and she has needed 4 or 5 days off to kind of recharge and do some self-care. And so she worked with her AI assistant to figure out what the threshold was to take this trip to San Juan. And overnight, it met that threshold. So her AI assistant purchased the tickets and set her on her way. And she'll be going on PTO immediately. Because also overnight, her AI assistant talked to her boss's AI assistant, saw the workload that she had, approved the PTO, and set her out of office. So she is gone from March 16th to March 20th. And all of this stuff is happening for Maya while she's brushing her teeth and before she has said a single word in the morning. My friends, welcome to the future. Except all of this stuff can happen right now because more and more often, travelers are turning to their phones for answers about where to go, when to go, and how much they want to spend. They're using influencers on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, and they're more and more obviously using large language models, LLMs like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, and the like. And when that happens, and when they don't go to our website, that is called zero-click search. And if you're not familiar with that term, that is okay. It's very simply anytime a traveler or a consumer gets the answer that they want and can, in some cases, make a conversion without ever visiting your website. And this is important because we are calling it internally the Copernicus moment, this moment where we have figured out that our website is no longer the center of the universe. It is merely a tool that a traveler can use in order to get what they want from us or out of us and move along with their day. And this is an important way to shift our thinking. We've been talking about data and stories and how travelers interact with us. Understanding that our website is just one part of all of that can be a shift for some people, but that is where we are in 2026. So I want you to imagine if we asked a couple who wanted to go for a travel vacation somewhere in this area, and they went to Google as I did 3 days ago, and typed in the following. My wife and I want to take our kids on a trip to October in Virginia. Our budget is $1,500. We love vintage diners, burgers, fall colors, and we want to kayak, and we want to do things that aren't necessarily on the brochure. When you put that into Google, and I've done this 7 times in the last 30 days, and this is the first time a DMO has actually shown up in this example, but when you put it into Google, typically you get a giant mess, right? You get this. Now, Virginia showed up, so they get an A plus. They're at the very top, but very quickly it falls apart, right? We get the art of the layover from 2009, 20 inspiring photos from 2009, 2021. This stuff is not helpful to the traveler. And very quickly, you see how search is failing them when they're asking this question. Because even with the Virginia example, they have to go to the website, they have to do the research, where for them, it's much easier to put it into ChatGPT. And this happens, right? It starts framing up a trip to Virginia. It gives us the budget reality. It lets me know, like, hey, it's doable. Just don't get too excited about doing extra stuff, but you can totally do it. And here's how I break it down. And it obviously starts to show me the visuals. We are visual creatures. It shows me where I'm going and what I should be doing on day one, what I should be doing on day two, and what I should be doing on day three. Because this is what happens when someone asks a question of ChatGPT or Perplexity or Grok or Claude. The AI interprets intent. In early models of AI, it was essentially a parlor trick. It was guessing what the next word a human would typically use when they were asking said question. And that got better and better as these platforms learned faster and faster. So it interprets the intent. What does the traveler want to do? What are they actually asking? To go to the arrivalist example, right? We're talking about people who are actually skiing, not just searching for boots on Google. And then it takes that intent and evaluates trust. What are the sources out there that I can trust to answer this question? And if we as the DMO, if we as the location or whatever, don't show up in this, oftentimes we will hear people say, well, it's because the AI is hallucinating. But in many cases, it just might be we are not answering the questions that we should own in the AI space. Because what happens next is the AI then synthesizes it across the known universe for where you might be found. Reddit, YouTube, Google, etc. And then it finds the answer and delivers it to the consumer or the traveler. Because the AI is going to find all of this stuff before the humans do, which means we have to continue to shift our thinking in this space to know that what does an AI need to know about our location before it tells it to a human? And if it doesn't find it, it's not going to answer us as the answer to the prompt, whatever people are asking for fall colors, right? Because the way that we're showing up to the machines, the way that we show up to chat or Gemini or whatever, is the way that we're showing up to humans. It's the way that they're seeing it as well. We're just not seeing that real-time reaction that you will with AI prompts, right? So think about this. How many of you right now have anything on your website that says this phrase, great for families? Because in the old marketing world, we used to use this a lot. It's great for families, except in the new world where we're answering to humans and to machines, great for families doesn't mean anything. So AI goes to search and figure out what's great for families, and the AI goes, I don't even know what that means. What is great for families? It's not specific enough. What kind of family? How old are the children? What is the pace of travel? What is their risk tolerance? What activities do they want to do? Do they want to be super busy, like a Disney vacation, or do they want to relax? And then most importantly, what is their budget? When you get to this phase, you start to see an image of what a family would look like, right? So let me quickly fly through some questions that I'm asking our internal teams and I'm asking other DMOs across the country about how they're dealing with the answer economy. So question one is, when your team has a good idea from that offsite you did 3 months ago, where do they live? Is it in a Google Drive, email, text thread, Slack thread, everybody's memory, a notebook? And more importantly, because when you do those offsites, there's stuff that you do immediately, and then there's stuff that you get to later. How quickly can you get to these good ideas? Where do they live? The next, that person on your team right now who, quote unquote, gets AI, if they left tomorrow, what are they taking with them? Systems, the entire plan, all of it? And do you have a backup for that person? Now, ideally, we don't want this human being to leave, but if they are leaving, is there someone behind them who also knows how to do what we're doing using AI, whatever that looks like? And then finally, last week, what did you measure? Traffic, engagement? Or are you actually measuring what a traveler found when they asked AI a question that you should own? And the important part in this slide is the idea that you should have a list of questions that you should own. When someone is looking to do fall colors, what are the things that you should own, and are you found there? So what should you do? I had a very short time today, so we're flying through this. But the first thing you should do is audit your website. And you're specifically looking for things like this: an unforgettable destination for everyone, a sentence that says nothing. Anytime I see a sentence like that that's not specific enough on my site, I am putting it on the list. We need to get rid of it. We need to make it more specific. Because what we're looking for here, friends, is clarity over cleverness. We're not doing prose anymore. We're doing chunking, right? This idea that the machines can go find context without having to guess what it means. So context chunking is just reformatting your blogs and any sort of text on your website so that the AI can pull out single bits and understand the context without the thing above it or the thing below it. You can see an example here from our website where you've got lots of headers that are indicating to the machine what is in the context below it, that gives it that ability to use us as the answer if someone is asking a question about what we do. So the other thing you're going to do is take the prompt that I gave you just 8 minutes ago. My wife and I want to take a trip, fall colors. And then we're going to dump it into all of these LLMs. And we're going to see what happens. And we're going to pay close attention to which one of these large language models like us, where do we show up, what questions do we own, and which ones over-index, which ones do we show up a lot in. And the ones that we don't show up a lot in, well, we need to start writing some content, making some videos, putting some stuff out there that makes us the answer to that question. And repeat this on a quarterly basis so we know where we stand in the AI ecosystem. All right. Like I said, only had a couple minutes. Wanted to make sure we get into the Q&A. So let's bring back Ktimene, Frida, and Josh, and we will start taking your questions for the remaining 13 minutes or so. All right. Let's see if we've got questions. All right, here we go. We've got a little bit of a jump ball, friends. So take this as you want or take this amongst yourselves. Do you have a top list of tips for how a DMO? Oh, this isn't actually for me. Sorry. Or we can all do this. Let's do this together. Do you have a top list of how DMOs can improve their search list for LLMs? I mean, my answer would be doing the audit and finding out where you show up first, and then starting kind of reverse engineer this. Frida, I know you're heavy into the research space. I'd love it if you had an answer for what you would, how you'd answer that question.
Well, we have seen that usually these models try to pick on blogs primarily or content that is written. So a good thought might be to really look into having some of those blog sections in your website or more written format content for your destination available. So it's easier for them to pick versus leaning more in the video. I mean, they both have different strategies why we use them, but I think for the model, for the AI in general, it does seem like the written content blog style format seems to be working better.
Ktimene?
From the arrivalist perspective, we look at measurement. So we actually look at visitation to the website, perhaps after they've been exposed to AI, and then what happens in the destination. And what we're seeing across the board is that, and this is in defense of the DMO website, actually, when they get there, their hand raisers, their information seekers, the median value is a 40% increase in spend in the destination. And when we look at destinations that are leaning into basically SEO for AI, Q&A formats on their blog pages, that they are seeing even higher lift. So that is meaningful, right? Don't scrap the website.
Oh, so let me
actually
jump in here for a half second
I
and
know,
just like it's really important that you have a website, but it's also important that you understand that your website has changed overnight, right? It's now not the
yeah,
front door, it's just one of the doors in the house, right?
yeah. We can see, for example, on Visit Denver, we can look at the dining pages and content and map that back to increases in spend. So not only the correlated spend, but how much more did they spend? And we can actually take this down to the bakery or the bookstore level to create
I
those
love
narratives with the community.
I love this story actually. So thank you for resharing that. Yeah. Can you expand on that just a little bit because that
Mhm.
I don't want you to gloss over that because I think that's
Yes.
super important for people to understand.
Okay, so to give some context about the methodology is we look at those visitors to the site, so basically page views, right, and map those back to a panel of credit card holders. It is domestic, so we're not looking at the international visitors, and we look at those who come to your destination after visiting your website, what content they were exposed to on your website, and then see what they spent in your destination overall. And then you could actually break it down into 100 merchant categories. You know, clock repairs is one of them, and you don't always have enough data to support those insights. But for categories like lodging, the in-destination spend, restaurants, etc., you can see that connection between going to the website and then spending something. And we take it a step further. We look at lift. So we know that some of them are going to arrive anyway, especially if they come to the website. They had that intent. So how much more do they spend? And where that becomes meaningful is creating those connections, let's say with Main Street, or if you're a state DMO, like Josh, understanding how your state website is driving economic vitality in a rural county that needs it, maybe more than those urban hubs.
Awesome. Josh, you have a input on AI? I'd love to get your sense.
I'm going to take a different angle. I think there's still a lot of people who are afraid to use it. And I think if you're not using it, you're not going to understand. Like it's counterintuitive that people still wouldn't, but I think some people are slow to adopt it. And so I would encourage you to start with trying to plan your own trip
Yes.
and see
Yes.
how you iterate through the questions, what answers are delivered up to you. And I think almost through osmosis, you will begin to understand the type of modifications you need to make to your site to achieve that.
Yeah, let me echo that because that is my favorite way to get people to kind of cross that chasm, Josh, is to go, you have to play with it first. Don't open up ChatGPT for the first time and start to run a campaign, right? You want to play with it first and kind of get the sense of it and understand how you might use it. And then, like Josh said, reverse engineer that process. All right, friends.
And
Yeah, go
if
ahead,
I
Frida.
can add very quickly here too,
Absolutely.
I think we are noticing and recognizing the importance of the growing audience that is using AI. It's going to happen eventually, and we know there are segments already part of it. So I know it's an effort that many destinations are embracing now. They are actually implementing AI tools within their website. So you have an opportunity to still do your search in this kind of format, but in a more controlled and get better quality information. So just wanted to share that. I know Mindtrip and some other tools are becoming very popular across the destinations as well.
Awesome. And that answers Jared's question about, any preferred data tool. So thank you. Thank you for that. All right, friends, I will let you each kind of have the last word and then we'll close out for the day. And Timothy, I'll start with you. Like any just last thoughts you want to make sure that people walk away with before we close for the day.
This
Or a
is a
haiku
continuation.
if you
Yeah.
don't have, yeah,
Oh, a
whatever you want
haiku.
to do.
Oh no. I'll try to come up with a haiku, but this is a continuation of the AI conversation. Actually, planned a trip to Costa Rica partly using AI, and I think the best practice is think about what is meaningful to your destination. So where's that interplay of AI and sustainability and advocacy? So my specific prompt was because I was having trouble finding it via Google. I want to go to places that are locally owned because I care about the money staying inside of that
Yep.
economy and not linking out to a multinational. Google couldn't help me find it. They just led me to the popular places, but AI did help me find it. So talk about your businesses that are locally owned or family owned, that are small, the things that are authentic to your destination that you wish to preserve. Make sure those get indexed when you feed to AI.
Awesome. Josh, what about you?
I don't know. I kind of tying this back to our other conversation. I think being clear, consistent, easy to understand in your content is the same as in your data and in your presentation and in your your storytelling. You'll be in a good position, I think, no matter what technology you use or how technology evolves. If you think about how it's going to be received by the customer first, and
Awesome. Frida?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to have this kind of conversation. I think it's very valuable. And my last thought would be in terms of data tools. I know that there are multiple partners we use, and I know as DMOs we have limited budgets for research, so we can only do so much. I think it's okay not to feel like you are left behind just because you're using less tools. It's more important to understand the data you have and the sites you can get and kind of make good use of them rather than just trying to chase more and more because it's just going to be overwhelming and not so efficient even to manage after all. But
Awesome.
thank you.
Awesome. Frida, Josh, Ktimene, thank you so much for your time today. The deck is going to hit your inbox. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you can head to Advanced Travel and Tourism at advancedtravelandtourism.com. And STS is at southeasttourism.org. Veronica Fraser is your point of contact there. A huge thank you to her and STS for having us today. I'm actually going to throw it back to her to close us out. Veronica, it's all yours.